Hello and welcome to this video. Today I'm going to teach you how to create your very own habit tracker in Google Sheets. I'm going to show you how to create this whole thing from scratch. We're going to start off with a blank spreadsheet. So the way this is going to end up working is you're going to double click on the very first day right here. You're going to double click and then a calendar will appear and you can select any date from that. And then each day will increase by 1 for 31 days. So if you set the number 1, then your last day is 31, but you can also start whenever and it's going to adapt accordingly, and then your progress bars are going to move, and then you're going to also learn a few formulas that you can either use for your habit tracker or for any other of your files. And if you have any questions or thoughts, please let me know. So I'm going to create a habit tracker that can fit 15 habits. I'm going to start by numbering those habits, and I'm going to try to use different formulas, so I could just go 1, 2, 3, but I want you to learn as many things as you can from this tutorial. So I'm going to use the sequence formula in this case. So I'm going to start typing and I'm going to get the sequence formula. And then if you press here on any formula, then you can see a sort of summary of what you're supposed to input, and then you can get even more details if you press on the arrow. So I want 15 rows, 1 column. I want to start in number 1, and then I want my numbers to increment by 1. So then I close parentheses and I get my 15 numbers. Now I'm gonna do something else. This is something that I do to every single one of my spreadsheets. I select everything in the sheet by clicking here, this square that's not a column or a row, this square right here. So if you click there, you select everything. So I always like to center my text. I like to vertically align it in the middle. And then I also like to select this wrap option. So what this does is it's going to avoid the text from overflowing. So for example, if you add a very long habit, and if I do this and it doesn't fit, it's going to make the row taller automatically. And then if I select the overflow option, then it's going to overflow into the other cell. And then if I select the clip option, then it's going to clip it. So my favorite one is this one. So I always like to have my settings for every single one of my spreadsheets this way. So this is going to be my number column. So I'm going to add this header, and then this is going to be my habits column. So I'm going to write that, and then I'm going to select these two and maybe make them bolder. I'm going to start with a black and white version, and then in the end we can decorate it. And then I'm going to select the numbers, and I'm also going to bold them. So then I'm going to make this a bit smaller. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to add our days. So the way I'm going to do that, first I'm going to make sure I have enough columns. So I'm going to select several columns to just click and drag, and then I right click and insert columns to the right. So it's going to offer you this number as many columns as you selected. So if you want to quickly add maybe 20 columns, then select 20 columns, and this option is going to say insert 20 columns right. So I just added 9. And then over here is where I want to have my days. And down here is where I want to have my checkboxes. So I'm going to start with the days. And I'm going to select cell D3. And then I'm going to click on data, data validation. And then I'm going to select from this dropdown, the criteria dropdown, I'm going to select the date option. I'm going to leave this is valid date option selected. I'm going to select reject input. And then you're going to check this box, and then you're going to click on save. So now if I double click on that cell, a calendar is going to appear and I can select a date from it. So I'm going to select August 1. Try to select a month that has 31 days just for the sake of this example. So I'm going to do August 1, and August has 31 days. And I'm going to get a date that looks like this. Now if I move over to the next column and I type equals, and then I select this cell plus 1, then I get August 2. And then if I click here and I drag, then I get August 3. And if I keep on dragging, I'm going to get a 1-day increment. So I'm going to keep on dragging until I reach August 31. Or whatever month you have, keep on dragging until you reach 31. If you don't have enough columns, then you can just go ahead and add them. I'm going to add more because we're gonna use that later. And then you can just delete the ones that you don't use. So I'm gonna add a bunch of them. So now you have your dates up here on increments of 1 day, but you definitely do not want them looking like this. So what we're going to do is we're going to select every single one of these dates. The way I do that fast is I'm gonna click on the first one, then I'm gonna scroll all the way over to the last one. I'm gonna press Shift, the Shift key on the keyboard. I'm gonna press Shift, and I'm going to click on the very last one, and that selects everything. You can also just drag it. Just make sure you're dragging the entire cell and not this little square right here, because that is going to mess up the formula. So make sure you select it over here, and then you scroll. So you select all of this, and then we're gonna format it. So what we want here is just the day. So we're gonna format it in a way that you're only gonna see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 instead of the whole thing. So we're gonna click on Format, Number, and then Custom Date and Time. So what you get here, you can either find that format in the list, and that format will look like this. It's just gonna be one number. So if you click there, you're gonna get this day option. And then if you click on these 2 arrows, you're gonna get all of these options. So you can have it lead with a 0 in case it's only 1 digit. And then you can also set the weekdays. So for now, we're gonna set the day without leading 0. Now, if you're having trouble finding just the day, just select any other date and delete the stuff that you don't need. So here I can just put my cursor here in the middle, and as if it were normal text, I'm deleting the month, and then I'm deleting the year, and then I'll delete that tiny comma, and I end up with the day. So I'm gonna click Apply, and as you can see, this is a date behind the scenes, but all I'm getting is the corresponding day. Now I want these columns to be smaller. So I'm going to click on column D, and then I'm going to scroll all the way to the one that has the very last day. And then I'm gonna press Shift, and then I'm gonna click on the column, and this is going to select the whole thing. You can also just click and drag. So I select everything, and then I can choose any random column, make it smaller, and it's going to apply to every single one of my columns. I'm going to make these numbers bold. Now the next thing I want to do is I'm going to add my checkboxes. So I am going to select all of these cells, and then I'm going to click on Insert Checkbox. And now I have all of my checkboxes. Now, in my opinion, they look too big, so I'm gonna make them smaller. And the way you do that is you come to the font size and you just change the font size. So I chose number 8, and right out of the box, you get the check functionality. So right now it's not doing anything useful, but it already has that effect of checking the box. So now this is the day, but I also want to have the weekday here on top. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to make this row taller, and then I'm going to select this very first day, and then I'm going to do equals, and then I'm going to select the one that's directly below. So the formula up here is equals D3, and it should end up showing me the exact same information that's below. And then I'm gonna click on this tiny square, and I'm gonna drag all the way to day 31. So what we have right now is exactly the same thing that we have below. Now this is also a date. So the only thing I'm doing is whatever's in this cell, I also want it in this cell. And it's also taking the formatting. So what I have here is a date, exactly the same as down here. This is a date, and we played around to make it look like it was just the number of the day, but behind the scenes, it's a full date. So that same applies up here. So now we're gonna change the formatting of this one at the top. So we're gonna go to Format, Number, Custom Date and Time, and then you're gonna get the day format. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna click on these 2 arrows, and you're gonna choose day as abbreviation. And then you're gonna click on Apply. And now what you get, instead of the day of the month, you're getting the weekday. Now to make it look prettier, I'm going to select that again, and then I'm going to click on this text rotation button, and then I'm gonna click on the rotate up one. And now it looks like this. And then I'm going to bold it. So that's what we have so far. Now I'm gonna add some habits just so it looks nice while we are working. Just fill out at least 5 with random text. just with whatever. It can be real habits or just random text, but fill at least 5 just for the sake of the example. So right now there's nothing attached to these checkboxes. So I'm going to show you a couple of formulas, a couple of things that you can add. So I'm going to make this a bit smaller, this column's a bit smaller. So the first thing I'm going to show you is the count if formula. So what we want, I'm going to check 2 boxes in the very first row. And what I want is that number. I want it so that every time that I check a box, a counter increases. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to do equals, and then I'm going to do the formula count if, open parentheses. I have to select the range first and then the criterion. So the range, I'm going to click and drag. This is the range. And then I'm going to enter a comma, and then the criterion is I want it to increase the counter if the checkbox is true. So whenever a box is checked, then that box is true. And if a box is not checked, then it's false. So if I enter, I get the number 3. And if I keep on checking boxes, that counter keeps on increasing. This is going to be my checked. Now let's do one for unchecked. I'm going to make that text smaller. So this is a number of cells that are checked. Now this is going to be the number of cells that are not checked. So I'm going to do equals count if again, open parentheses. I'm going to select my range, which is every single checkbox from my first row, from the corresponding row that I'm working on, then comma, and then I'm going to do false. So I'm going to enter. So in here, as you can see the formula, I'm doing count if true. And then in this one, I'm doing count if false. And we know that we have 31 days. So we can add one that is total. Again, I'm going to make it smaller. And then if I do equals checked plus unchecked, then I get 31. And if I select all these 3 and then I click on this tiny square and I drag, then that formula is replicated for every single row. So when I add a checkbox, then its corresponding counters are increasing or decreasing accordingly. And I always get total 31. Now let's say you want the percentage. So you can do percentage completed. You make it smaller. And then you do equals the number of checked boxes divided by the total. And then enter. And what you get is this decimal, really long decimal number. So to format it as a percentage, you just select the cell and you come to this format as percent option. And now it's formatted as a percentage. And then you click and you drag that tiny square, and it's going to apply that formula to every single one of those rows. So as soon as I keep on checking boxes, that percentage keeps on increasing. I'm gonna pull this. Now all of these 3 columns are involved in creating this percentage, just so you had clarity on where everything was coming from. You can also just do it directly in one cell. So for example, you already know that you have 31 spaces, so you don't need to calculate this number. So you could do equals count if, and then the range true divided by 31. And then you format it as a percentage and you click on the square and you drag down and you get the exact same number, and you skipped all of these columns. So I just separated them for you to have clarity on where everything is coming from, but you can just skip every step and do something like this without the need of separating every single one of these values. But I'm gonna leave it like this just for the example. I'm gonna leave the longer version. Now we're gonna move on to adding a progress bar for each row. I'm going to make this slightly bigger. I'm going to start by writing down an example that's not attached to any of this. I'm going to paste this formula in the description down below, so you can just go and copy it, because this specific one, it's very easy to just mess up a comma and break the whole thing. So I'm going to paste this example below, and once you get it into the corresponding cell, you're going to follow the steps that I show you to tie it to this percentage. So we're going to tie this progress bar to this percentage, but we're going to start with an example. So I'm going to do SPARKLINE, which is the formula for the progress bar. And then for data, I'm going to write the number 5. So I'm going to show you why in a minute. So I'm going to write the number 5. Then I'm going to do a comma. I'm going to open curly brackets. open quotations, and then I'm gonna do chart type. Then I'm gonna close quotations. I'm gonna do a comma, open quotations, bar, close quotations, and then I'm gonna do a semicolon, open quotations, max, close quotations, comma, and then I'm gonna do the number 10. And then for the color, I'm gonna do a semicolon, open quotations, color 1, very important, the number 1, then close quotations, then comma, open quotations, black, close quotations, and then we close the curly brackets, and then we close the parentheses. So you can pause this video, look at the formula. If you want to write it down, you can do that. If you want to copy it, you can find it in the description down below. So right now, these two numbers are just the number 5 and the number 10. They are fixed. They are not tied to anything in my habit tracker right now. So this is just an example. So we can start with it, understand the formula, and then we can move on and tie it into that corresponding row. So I'm going to press an enter. And what you can see here is I have my max value. I set that as 10. And then my current value is 5. So if I change that 5 to 7, then the bar moves a little bit more. And if I change it to 10, which is my max value, then the bar is completely filled. So now let's do percentages. So if this becomes 10% and my max value becomes 100%, then the bar is only 10% filled. If I do 50%, then it's 50% filled. So we're gonna leave this max value as 100%, and then we're gonna come into this section right next to the comma, and we're gonna delete it. We're gonna leave the comma there, that's very important. And then we're going to select this cell right here, the cell that has the percentage. So you're gonna end up with the cell address that has the percentage for that corresponding row, then a comma, and then these curly brackets that have all of your progress bar options. So you have the chart type, and it means your chart type is a bar. The max value is 100%, and the color is black. Don't forget this number 1, or you'll end up with an orange bar. So if you forget it, you end up with an orange bar. So let's do this color 1. So now this progress bar is tied to this percentage, and 100% is my maximum value. So as soon as I start checking boxes, that progress bar is now moving. So now it's all connected. And now to replicate that behavior for every single row, you just select the cell and you click on the tiny square in the bottom right corner and you drag. And now there's a formula for every one of my rows. And as soon as I start adding values, then that progress bar starts to move. Now, as I mentioned, it's not completely necessary that you have all these 3 columns. You can leave it if you want, but I'm gonna change the formula so I don't use any of these columns. So I am going to do equals count if my range is true, and then that divided by 31. And that's gonna give me my percentage. So then I'm going to select this tiny square. I'm gonna drag the formula down. Nothing changed, so we get the exact same value just through a different formula. And then I'm just gonna delete this column. So these were just an example, but I'm gonna delete them and everything still works fine. So if I fill every single one of these values, then I end up with 100% and my bar is completely full. So this is a progress bar that will work for each habit, so for each row. Now you can also add a vertical progress bar down below. So I'm gonna make row 20 taller, and I'm gonna start by adding the number of habits that I have. So the way I do that is I want to know how many of these cells actually have any text. So the way I do that is with the formula count A. So I'm gonna do count A, open parentheses. I'm gonna select this entire section, then I'm gonna close parentheses, enter, and it's giving me the number 5. I'm gonna make it bigger and I'm gonna bold it. So I have 5 habits, and if I add a new one, then this counter increases and now I have 6 habits. So I'm gonna use this number to create my percentage of tasks completed during a single day. So first I'm gonna create the number of tasks completed for a single day. So I'm gonna do equals count if this range is true, and then I'm gonna press enter. And that gives me the number 5. And if I check this box, then it gives me the number 6. And if I uncheck them, then they start decreasing. So let's do the percentage now. I'm gonna do equals this cell divided by my total number of habits. If I press enter, I get this decimal number, which I can turn into a percentage by clicking on format as percent. And then it's too big, so I'm gonna make it smaller. I'm gonna do font 7, but it's still too big. And I don't really care about the decimals, so I'm gonna use this option to decrease decimal places. So right next to the format as percent button, you get this decrease decimal places button. And if you click on it twice, you're just gonna end up with a rounded number. So I might end up doing font 8. So I have 3 tasks completed out of 6, which is 50%. If I complete all 6, then I get 6 tasks completed and 100%. So let's do tasks completed, and then this is the percentage. Now, if you select these 2 cells and you click on the tiny square and you drag, you're gonna end up with a bunch of errors because we haven't locked certain cells. So if you click on the formula, you're gonna see that for this one, I'm only using this range. And if I select it and then click on the tiny square and drag, then I press enter, then I can see that the range is moving properly. But for the percentage, what happens is when I drag the formula, I'm also dragging this value, and this value should always be fixed to this counter. So the way we do that is, I'm going to delete these errors. So the way we do that is you come to the formula, and then you select the cell that contains the counter, you select it in the formula, and then you press F4 in your keyboard. If you can't find the F4 option, the way to do it manually is by adding this money symbol before and after the letter C, or whatever letter you have if you didn't follow this exact same layout. And then you press enter, then that cell is always going to be fixed. So if you click and drag, wherever I click, if I press enter, it's referencing the cell directly above, but it's always dividing it by the same counter. And I'm gonna select them both, and I'm going to click and drag all the way over here. So I already have my percentages, and now I'm going to create my progress bar. So again, I'm going to begin with an example. I'm not going to write the whole thing down because it's really long and it's really easy to mess up. So you can just copy it from the description. So you're going to go and you're going to find the code that looks like this one. So you're going to press enter, and then you're going to paste the formula. So right now it's not tied to anything. These values are just manually fixed. You have 50% and the bar is halfway there. You have the minimum value, which is 0, and then you have the maximum value, which is 100. So then if I do 100% instead of 50%, then the bar is full. If I do 10%, then the bar is 10% full. So now we're going to delete this. We're going to leave the comma, and right before the comma, we're going to select the percentage. And then we're going to press enter. And now it's tied to this percentage. So as soon as I start unchecking boxes, my bar starts decreasing. And if I check them again, then my bar starts increasing. And then I'm going to click here, and I'm going to drag all the way to day 31. So let's recap before we start decorating it. So we use the sequence formula in this cell to create a sequence of numbers from 1 to 15. Then we used the data and data validation option to be able to double click and select a day from the calendar. So what you do here is whatever day you select, then it's going to always increase by 1. So you can select any day. If you want to start on a specific Monday or Sunday, then you can just select that, and you are going to get a sequence of 31 days after your first selection. And then we played around with the formatting to get the weekday text and to get just the number. But remember, these are actually dates, full dates that were formatted to look this way. And then we did the percentage. We used the COUNTIF formula to count how many cells are true within a range. And then we divided it by 31, which is the number of total cells, to get the percentage of tasks completed. So that part is just math. So whenever this percentage changes, we use the SPARKLINE formula and we tied it to this percentage. So it would increase to a maximum value of 100. And then we used the count A formula here to count the number of habits that we entered. We once again used the COUNTIF formula to count the number of cells that were checked. And then we use this percentage, we just divided the number of cells checked by the number of total habits. And then we tied this SPARKLINE formula, we tied it to that percentage with a maximum value of 100%. So whenever we check and uncheck the boxes, our progress bars move. Right now, I'm just gonna do some quick decoration. So what I like to do is I like to remove my unused rows and columns. So I'm gonna select them and then I'm going to delete them. And then I'm going to select maybe row 27 and then I'm on a Mac, so the way I do that fast is I'm gonna click on Shift and Control, the Shift and Control keys at the same time, and then I'm gonna press the down arrow. And this brings me all the way to the very last row. So then I'm gonna right click and then I'm gonna select delete row. So that leaves me just with this space, which is what I like. So I like to remove the grid lines and then I like to make them a bit lighter. So if you click on View, Show, and then Grid Lines, and you select that option, it's going to remove all of your grid lines. And then I am going to manually set them again, but with a lighter color. So I'm gonna select all of this, and then I'm gonna come into this Borders option, and I'm gonna click on the color, and I'm gonna select this second color, light gray 3. And then I'm gonna click on this second option that it's just gonna color inner borders. So once I do that, I get all of my grid lines back, but they are lighter. And then I'm gonna select everything again. I'm gonna click on borders. I'm gonna change the color to maybe a darker gray. And then I'm gonna click on outer borders option. And now I painted the outer borders with a different color. Now you might be wondering how you can change these progress bar colors. And the way you do that is, as you can see, you have this black text here, and if you change the text, it's going to change the color. But you can also just write a hex value. So instead of black or red or whatever, you write the hex value, you Google a hex value that you like from a color palette that you like, and then you write that in that space, and then you press enter, and your progress bar will now be that color. So if you select the tiny square and you drag, it changes the formula of every single row. And then you can do the same for these vertical ones. So where you have the black text, you can replace that with a hex value, and then you can drag the formula and then you change that color. So then I want to change the background here. So I'm gonna select these weekday labels. I'm gonna click on the fill color bucket, and then I'm gonna click on this plus symbol. And as you can see, you can add a hex value here. So I already Googled the one that I wanted. So I'm just gonna paste it, and I'm also gonna include them in the description down below in case you're interested in them. So I just press OK, and then my background changed. So I'm gonna select those same cells, and then I'm gonna select text color. I'm gonna click on the plus symbol. I'm gonna paste my hex value. And then I also want my numbers to have that same look. So I'm just gonna click on the fill bucket. I'm gonna click on the text label. And then maybe I also want this to be purple. So I'm gonna add this color, but then as you realize, there's this line right here. So if you don't like it, you can select both cells and merge them. And then maybe you can write something here like my habit tracker. And then you can change the text color, and then you can make that text bolder, and you can also make it bigger. You can make this smaller. And then I also want to change the background of this. So I'm gonna go and I'm gonna click on my dark purple. I'm gonna make my text white. And then maybe I decide I want this background to be white. And then maybe you want your borders to be thicker, so you can select borders. And then if you click here on the style, you can just change the line style, and then you can select maybe the purple color. Now you have this bolder look. Also, I'm realizing maybe this division isn't that necessary, so you can select that row, right click, and then delete the row. And then maybe add another border up here, and then maybe add a border to the left. And maybe you also want this to be dark purple with white text. Maybe this purple might be too much. Select a different purple. Now, if you want to get rid of these lines that don't really do much, you can just select all of these and then merge it. And then it just ends up being one big white space. Same here. So I think that looks decent enough. Once you're done, if you want to start over, you don't have to manually go and uncheck every single box. You can just copy one checkbox that is unchecked, you select your entire set of checkboxes and you paste. And now I deleted everything. Now, as you can see, if I check a box that doesn't have a habit tied to it, it's still going to work. So I'm going to show you a trick so you can visually stop yourself from doing this. There's other ways to do it. I could make it so that the spreadsheet behaved in a way that it will ignore these cells if there's no text here, but I think that's a bit more complex and I don't want to confuse you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that with conditional formatting, so you get a visual warning when this is happening and you can go ahead and fix it. So what you're going to do is you're going to select your habits, all 15 of them, without the numbers, just column C. And then you're going to click on Format, Conditional Formatting, and then you're going to select the format rules. You're going to scroll all the way down to Custom Formula. So you can copy and paste this directly from the description, but you need to adapt it in case you didn't follow exactly the layout that I followed. So you're going to do equals, and then you're going to do and then you're going to do C4, which is the very first cell of the range. So if C4 is equal to empty, which is quote symbol twice, so if cell C4 is empty and cell AI4, which is the one that holds my percentage, is greater than 0%, and then I close parentheses, then I'm going to turn the background red. So I'm not gonna dive too deep into how this works. Just make sure that you are using these cells accordingly. So C4 equals to empty, which is two quote symbols. That C4 should be whatever your first habit cell address is. And then AI4 greater than 0, that should be whatever your first percentage cell is for your first row. So then you click done and you close this. So whenever I check a box in a row that doesn't have a habit, it's going to turn red. So that's like a visual warning to let yourself know that you just messed something up. So that's it for this video. I hope you liked it. I hope you found it useful and that you maybe learned something new. If I lost you somewhere along the way, please let me know so I can start adapting my tutorials accordingly. Maybe you want them to be more complicated, or maybe you want them to be easier, or maybe you want me to dive deeper into a certain functionality. So please let me know. This is my first tutorial, so I tried to do something that was sort of in between, but just let me know your thoughts, let me know what I can do better, and thank you for watching.